Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in wa ba'd. So we stopped on page 91 in the last paragraph. Alright, so it said reading skills are not the same as speaking skills. The input for writing comes through reading. And we were talking about this the last class, which was a very long time ago, where we talked about the productive skills and the receptive skills. At first you need to work on what? Strengthening the receptive skills first before you can start, because you can't produce something that what? You don't have. It's impossible. First you need to what? You have to have input before you can make what? Output. It's like what? You can't withdraw money from a bank if you have no money in the bank, right? You know, so you have to put something in before you can take something out. So the whole point of like productive skills, you have to have first the receptive skills. We said the receptive skills were what? What are they?
Your hearing.
Listening?
Yeah. Your vision.
No, listening and what?
Touch.
No.
Speaking.
No.
Smelling.
No, you're talking about the hawas al-khams. You're talking about the five senses. We're talking about skills. There's only 4 skills when you're talking about language learning.
Oh.
Reading, writing, speaking, listening. Those are the 4 skills that you need to learn a language. So which of those 4 skills are receptive?
Are receptive.
Receptive. Listening and what?
Speaking. Oh, reading.
Reading, because you're receiving information. And when you're listening, you're receiving information. You're receiving language. You're analyzing the language in your mind because you have to do what? You have to understand it. If you don't understand it, then what? You're not receiving anything. It's when you process that information and you understand it and then you formulate a response, that becomes what? Producing. So the same thing, you could produce through speaking and you could produce through what?
Reading.
What do you produce in reading?
Speaking and writing.
Speaking and writing. Speaking, you're producing language. Writing, you're producing language. Reading, you're taking it in. It's input. Writing is output. Listening is input. Speaking is what? Output. So those are productive skills. Speaking and writing. The receptive skills, what? Reading and listening. So you have to strengthen the receptive skills first. That requires a lot of patience because the majority of the people, they want to talk. Most people don't care about writing. They don't care about how the writing is, but they care about how they speak. I just want to be able to speak the language. Well, first you need to be able to what? Understand what the person, how can you be in a conversation if you can't even, you can't analyze the language, you can't understand it, how can you formulate a response to something that you don't even understand? So this is what we're talking about. So reading skills are not the same as speaking skills. Because reading skills produce what? Reading skills are the what? The receptive skills, but they produce what? Writing. The more you read, the better you can what? The better you can write. Because writing, when you're writing and reading, it's different than when you're speaking. Have you ever read a book of somebody that's really, really bad, and you say, man, you wrote this the way that you speak? If you ever hear teachers complain about essays from students because of this. You're writing, you're putting all the interjections and everything into oh my God, wow, it's like, no, you're writing for what? You're writing for a reader, you're not writing for a listener. So the same thing, when you see the ulama, when they record lessons, and then they take these lessons and they put it into a book, what does the sheikh do before the book is printed? He goes through and reads it and cleans it up to make it more palatable for the reader. Because if you just took a lesson that was recorded and he's talking to people and then you try to put it into a book and you try to read it, a lot of stuff you won't even understand because you're not in the conversation. And you're taking out a lot of the context, you're taking a lot of, the intonation and everything, because he might be asking a question, but you can only understand it. He's asking a question through what? His tone of voice. Well, if you take that tone out and to put it into writing, what happens? It's gone. Now you're confused. I don't know what's going on. Is he asking a question? Is he giving a statement? Or what's going on? Yeah. So when you write for a reader. When you speak, you're speaking for what? A listener. So these skills, they go hand in hand. You know, the more that you improve your listening, the better you be what? You speak. The more you improve your reading, the better that you write. It's simple. Because you're seeing the words. Now you have to write them. You know, because it's all visualization. Whereas speaking, it's not visualization. It's what? It's auditory. It's you know, you're taking what you hear and you're analyzing it without seeing it. So there's two different skills. So he said reading, he said, me said, I said. Reading skills are not the same as speaking skills. The input for writing comes through reading. If you have a 6th grade reading level, you're going to write like a 6th grader. That is that. As your reading level improves, you will notice a simultaneous improvement in your writing. To take your writing skills to the next level, you have to focus on the style of writing and the word choices of the author. So when you start to want to become a writer and improve your writing, then you start to analyze what? The styles of writing and why did he say this? Why did he use this word? Why, you know, you start to look at the grammar and you start to look at all these types of things that are important. You do the same thing for any language that you study, whether it's English, Arabic, or whatever. Whatever language you use, this is what you have to do. It's the same across the board. It doesn't matter what language you're using. You have to study. You have to study the actual writing styles. Why did the author write the sentence using the word instead of using this word instead of that word? Is a question you need to be asking as you are reading. When you start to analyze other people's writing, your writing will begin to improve exponentially. As they say, when you read, read like a writer, and when you write, write like a reader. When you read, read like a writer, because you're thinking like what is going on in the writer's head as he's writing this, and that's what you're reading because you're trying to understand why he wrote it. And when you write, write like a what? Reader. Like a reader. You're going back and like, okay, as a reader, would I like this?
Understand this.
Yeah, exactly. Would this be comprehensible? Yeah. However, in the beginning, you will be learning language like a baby learns. You will listen and you will repeat. When you get good at this, you can begin to be taught more and more. A lot of people do not have the patience for this stage and they want to jump into grammar and reading books. Those people are never successful. Everybody has to start at those baby stages. And, you know, you have to listen to your teacher. You know, your teacher will let you know when you are improving and what you need to improve on. And then this is the common thing that a lot of people do, especially from the West. It's sad. You go up to a teacher and say, what do I need to work on? And he tells you, and you go back and do the opposite of what he told you. So what would you ask him for? You know, if you have trust in that teacher, that he knows what he's doing, to the point where you're sitting there learning from him, then you should trust his advice to the point of what? Yeah, taking it and implementing it and put it into practice. But you don't. You go and do the opposite. You know, a lot of people, they're going to ask for advice, but they're going to do what they want to do in the end. But they want to hear if you're going to tell him that he should do what he already wants to do. And that's what he's going to do in the end. Those people are never successful. Never. You go, you get advice, you try to learn what's your mistakes, where you need to improve, and work on those things. All right. You have to listen to your teacher. Your teacher will let you know when you are improving and what you need to improve on. Do not shy away from criticism at this stage, because a lot of people say, oh, I don't want... Man, again, people who don't like to be criticized, if you don't like to be criticized, seeking knowledge is not for you. Go find another job. Go work in a warehouse. Even in the warehouse, you're going to be criticized. You know what I'm saying? Every job, anything that you do in this life, you're going to be criticized. So get over it. You know, at least now you're being criticized doing something that's pleasing to Allah. Learning the Arabic language so you can understand the Quran and the Sunnah. You know, so you should have no problem with that. Do not shy away from criticism at this stage. In fact, you should welcome criticism because you're going to be making a lot of mistakes. And if you have a teacher that is not correcting you, something is wrong. You see a lot of these teachers, like the students, they make the mistakes and the teacher just, oh, it's okay. It's okay. No, it's not okay. Because the mistakes, you know, this is what the people of linguistics, they refer to as fossilization. Fossilization, it means what? And when they talk about fossilization in linguistics, it means that the mistake becomes fossilized. You can't change it. Like, you know, you've been making that mistake for so long, it's over. Like, even when somebody tells you it's a mistake, you go right back to making the mistake again. No, those mistakes need to be pointed out in the early stages. They need to be corrected. You should be striving for perfection, but at the same time understanding that you're going to be making a lot of mistakes and getting the criticism and getting the feedback. Don't look at it as a criticism. Look at it as what? As feedback. Because that's what you're getting. You're getting feedback. All right? Are you going in the right direction? Are you doing the things? Or What are you having problems pronouncing? What do you need to work on? And then these are the things that you need to just improve. Improve them in the early stages. Don't wait till you get like in the later stages and then now you finally get a teacher who's going to tell you the truth. And now you know how hard it is to go back and correct everything. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can do it. It's not impossible, but it's going to require a lot of effort to go back. And you got to, just like you had to, memorize that page. It took you 500 times to read it, to memorize it. The way that you memorize it with the mistake, now you're going to have to read it 500 more times to memorize it with what? Without the mistake. So Allah musta'an. It's what you're going to have to do. All right. So he said, do not shy away from criticism at the stage. In fact, you should welcome criticism because you're going to be making a lot of mistakes. And if you have a teacher that is not correcting you, something is wrong. Demand feedback on your improvement. Ask about your weaknesses and try to improve in those areas instead of focusing on your strengths. When you're in a job and you're doing something like a skill, you focus on your strengths. You don't have time for your weaknesses because your strengths are what makes you money. But not when you're learning. When you're learning, your strengths, you continue to, maintain your strengths. Don't let them go. But you really need to focus on bringing your weaknesses up to par. Because you have, like I said, 4 skills. You're reading, writing, listening, speaking. Out of those 4 skills, the majority of the people are going to at least have one of those skills that they're just really slow in. A lot of the people might be reading. So if he's reading bad, if he's slow in reading, he's going to be slow in what? And writing. His writing is going to be all chopped up and, 6th grade, 5th grade level. And yeah, I'm not talking about the level of handwriting. I'm just talking about your ta'bir and your expression in writing. How you articulate yourself through your writing is just going to be choppy. It's not going to run smooth. All right, that's the majority of people. All right, welcome to the club. You're not anything special. But, you don't want to be like the majority of the people. You want to move past the mediocre, where the people are just focusing on understanding a question and giving his response and letting the world listen to him. Everybody wants to focus on speaking. You don't do that. You focus on the things that the people don't focus on because that's how you're going to become successful. Doing the things that people don't want to do, not doing all the things that people just want to do. All right. When you're studying books of ta'bir, I will give you the same advice that I gave you for the previous phase, which, by the way, we haven't recorded yet. So we're going to record the next phase, the previous phase after this, inshallah. All right. Write everything out in a notebook. Do not become lazy now. If you're doing a book of ta'bir, and they're asking a question and it's fill in the blank, don't just fill in the blank. If you just fill in the blank, what have you done? You wrote an answer. You produced no language. You wrote a word. You need to produce language at this stage. That means write out the whole entire question and then write out the whole entire answer in a notebook. Don't write in the book. Leave the book alone. Leave the book empty and blank. You could pass it down to the next person that wants to study it so he doesn't have to go pay all the money for these books, right? But if you look at like the main book that people study now is Al-Arabiya Bayna Yadayk, how much money do they spend on these books? Then you go writing all the stuff in the books. For what? What was the benefit of writing in the book? Absolutely nothing. You produce no language. Write it out in a notebook. Question, answer, question, answer, question, answer. And take that notebook and read from what? Read from what you wrote. Read from what you produced on your own paper. Read it out loud. When you read it, don't read it like this. Again, you're not producing anything. Again, you want to work on your speaking. You want to work on what? You're listening. How do you work on listening if you're alone? Read out loud. Read out loud. And let yourself listen to it. Let yourself try to catch the mistakes. Because the teacher told you how to pronounce this. It told you how to say this word. Listen to it. Record yourself. Play it back and listen to yourself again. And try to catch the mistakes. And this way you start to improve. You're listening. You're improving all your skills all at once. If you're writing it out, you're reading it out loud, so you got your listening. And you're also, because you're using your voice, you're also what? Speaking. So all 4 skills are all in motion, all at once. Don't be lazy. Continue the hard work ethic you built up in the first phase and keep it moving. Write out the conversations, the whole entire conversation, write it out. Not just the questions and answers, everything. And when you write out the conversation, you take it, every chapter is going to start off with a small conversation. Write it out in a notebook. Take it, read it like 5 or 6 times. until you got it going in your head, until you can read it smoothly. Maybe it takes 10 times. For me, when I was first started studying, it took me 25 times to read it to where I could get it smooth without making a mistake. And then I will go to the questions. I write out the question, and I want to answer the question from what?
You want to what?
I want to answer the question from my memory.
Oh.
Not going back. I already read the conversation 25 times. If I have to go back to the conversation to get the answer, then what? Then I need to read it another 25 times. All right, so you want to, test your memory. Write it out. Write out the answers from your memory. Go back to the reading and check your answers once you're finished. And you keep doing this, and keep practicing like this. And the language will start to pop in your head a lot faster because you're stressed and you're putting stress on yourself to understand it, to get it, to grasp it. And that's where you start to learn the most. That's when you benefit the most. If you look at like in anybody that's known for like exercise, when do you benefit from the most when exercise? No. When you think that you're done and you push yourself just that little bit more, because the majority of the people, once they feel like I'm finished, I'm done, they haven't reached 100%. They're not even 50%. They're probably around 45. Maybe let's say they use 50% of their energy. But you pushing yourself past where you would normally stop, and pushing yourself and putting that stress on you, like, no, we're gonna do 10 more pull-ups. No, we're gonna do 20 more push-ups. No, we're gonna, just one more set or 2 more sets. That's when you start to build strength, because you're pushing yourself beyond your limits. So same thing with language. It's all repetition, but it's also pushing yourself past that comfort zone. Like this is where now comfort ends. Now this is where benefit starts. This is where learning is going to start. This is where you're going now up to the next level. Otherwise, if you stop where you're comfortable, guess what's going to happen? You're staying at the same level. You're never progressing. You're never moving forward because you got comfortable in this little area, in this little bubble. So you can't. You got to push yourself beyond that. You got to go out of that comfort and keep pushing yourself more and more and more. There's no other way. That's it. That's the secret to success. It's like all this other stuff. 5, like I could give you 5 laws of success. No, this is success. It's discipline. It's hard work. It's just pushing yourself past that. Just like here's where comfort ends and benefit begins. And now let's get get yourself to that point of discomfort and then keep pushing yourself further and further and further. I said, write out the conversations and write out all the exercises from the book in the notebook. If the lesson is easy, it is sufficient to write it once. However, if the lesson was giving you problems, you should write it out a few more times for extra practice. Once you have written the conversation out, you should read it over and over again from your writing. Like I said, you read it until you can read it without making a mistake. It's not necessary that you memorize it, but read it enough to the point where it's like you can read it smoothly. Where the teacher asks you to read it the next day, it will just what? It will flow out without mistakes. Like that. You got it. All right. However many times that takes. If you can do it in 5 times, 10 times, 20 times, 100 times, you do what you know about yourself. All right. Once you have written out the conversation, read it. All right. It is easier to memorize from your own writing than it is from a book because your mind produces what is on the paper. Your mind is writing out how it sees it. So isn't it easier for you to put back what you already produced from your mind than it is to read? Like, for example, I can memorize from this book. But is this how my mind's going to produce it? If I were to write it out by hand, is it going to look like this? So what would be easier, for me to memorize from my own handwriting or memorize from this? From my own handwriting. Because my mind already produced it. And it's produced it in a way that it sees it. That it you know what I'm saying? It analyzes it. And I'm putting it back. How much easier is that? So it's a lot easier. Like to write out a hadith and memorize it from your own handwriting is a lot easier than taking Sahih Bukhari and memorizing a hadith from the book. Because that's not how you write. That's not your mind now. It's going to take longer to stamp that in because that's not how you write. That's not your writing. But if you write it, that's your mind it's already pictured it. It's already there. Now what are you doing? You're just putting it back. You know what I'm saying? You just, all right. Slam it back in, right? It's easy. All right. So he said it is easier to memorize from your own writing than it is from a book because your mind produced what is on the paper. And now you are just putting it back. We can see the truth of this when we look at the people from Mauritania and how they memorize the Quran, because they memorize how? They have a tablet, they go to the sheikh recites the ayat from the Quran or the abiyat al-shi'r or whatever it is that they're memorizing, and they write it out the way that the sheikh said it. When they're done writing it, they show it to the sheikh. The sheikh says, good. It's good. Then what do? They sit there, they put the tablet right there, and they read it over and over and over and over again, 500 times, 300 times, until it's stamped in their memory. And then the next day, they go, they clean the tablet off, and it's done because they read that over like 300 to 500 times. It's stamped in their mind now. All they got to do is what? Revise it from their memory. The next day, the sheikh's going to give them the next page of the Quran. They're going to write it on the tablet. And then they're going to do the same thing until they finish the Quran. So yeah, that's a lot better. They write out every page on a wooden tablet and they memorize from their own writing. Their memories are definitely much stronger than the people that memorize from books. That's no doubt. And that's the way the Salaf work. You go and you read about the memorization of Bukhari, the memorization of Sufyan al-Thawri, Sufyan ibn Uyayna, Shu'bah, Imam Ahmed, Imam Malik. They wrote the stuff out on their own hands. They memorized from what they wrote. They didn't have books that were produced, like mass-produced from these printer presses, and they were memorizing from this. They wrote everything. All the books that they had were all handwritten. If they wanted a book, they wanted a copy of the book, what did they do? They had to borrow the book from a sheikh, handwrite it out, and give the book back to the sheikh. You understand? And that's how you look at the memory that they had, and look at what they were able to achieve in their academics, and what we failed to achieve because what? We got everything handed on a platter to us. Book's ready, everything's ready. Open up the book, memorize from the book. That's why stuff doesn't stick with us. I challenge you to go write out 1,000 hadiths, write them out in notebooks, and memorize from your notebooks, and see the difference between what you memorize from your notebooks and what you memorize from a mass-produced printed book. It's gonna be completely different. Layla and Nahar. It's gonna be the difference between the night and the day. So I mean, this is what we have. You really want to be successful, that's what you have to do. Can't be lazy about writing. You can't be lazy about writing. Even like I told y'all, even about this book, the Daily Hadith book. I have it. I wrote it out. I have it like this right here. I don't ever look at this. I only look at this when we're teaching it, when we're going over it, when we're studying this book. Mine's in a notebook. It's all written out. And that's what you should do. My son does the same thing. Huh? Yeah. You started it before. I mean, I've always told you to do that. You started before, but now inshallah, you continue. And that's the way we're going to do things, inshallah.